Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog with Riot Mort. Or should I call it Your Face is a Podcast? I watched Froden's Chibi Challenge, and one of the questions was alternate names for my podcast. And Your Face is a Podcast definitely sounds like the kind of thing I would have named it for sure. Mortable Forge wasn't bad either, but I think we'll stick with Walk the Dog. It's pretty good. Those chibi challenges are pretty fun, but man, it's also funny how hard they are for a lot of people. So I still hold the record at whatever 12 or 13 questions or whatever. I got a bunch of hard esport ones when I did it too, man. Any of the game ones are like no problem. I did really like how Rain mathed out trying to solve the crab rave one, though. I thought that was a cool approach to the problem. So, good stuff. Today is Tuesday. I get to go play my first game of Magic Commander today with some high school buddies, so that's going to be fun. Leo's feeling better. Charlene's feeling better. Liam's a little sick now, but he's okay. He slept like half the afternoon yesterday. Everyone just kind of sleeps it off. So, and yeah, just kind of chilling. I didn't do much yesterday other than I watched Squid Game Season 3, which wasn't very good. So, I don't know. Played some Binding of Isaac, stuff like that. But yeah, otherwise generally relaxing day. Speaking of which, time to answer some questions. Today's are good ones. I like today's questions. Some are hard, some are interesting. Let's get to it. All right, first question. Do you think the TFT team will do changes I'm against to troll me now that I'm off the team for 3 months? So, I think the short answer here is no. I don't think they will. I think, if anything, there's just not enough time to. A lot of TFT's foundational direction is pretty established. A lot of our core things are pretty locked in. And if anything, Blue Velvet's also still there. And he and I are usually pretty aligned on like where we want to take the game, who the audience is, stuff like that. I think realistically, the biggest change that you might notice is like, okay, let's use an example from set 14. Let's say there's a 5-cost like Kobuko in set 15 that like clearly isn't kind of working out or has some issues and maybe needs a rework. I think people coming up with the solve might take a different approach, right? Maybe not the way I would do it, or I can't. There's other things I could bring up as examples, but I can't yet because I can't spoil the new set. But like the TLDR here is, if there's a thing that isn't working out or needs changed from our initial direction that needs a new solution, I think there will be a different approach to those solutions that may not be the same one as like I would do, And that's okay, because maybe their solution will be different or better. You never know. But other than that, like, I don't think there's enough going on. And that's also one of the benefits of us having like a pretty long runway. And what I mean by that is, 15 is about to come out. 16's already pretty far along. 17's being worked on. 18's starting to be worked on. Like we have a pretty long runway. And so me leaving isn't going to be like all of a sudden, okay, Mort's gone, let's change 17 to a kart racer. Like, nah, that's not happening. And not to mention there are, other people, like I said, like Blue Velvet or my boss that are going to be like, excuse me, you're doing what now? So I don't think that's actually a thing that's going to happen. So I think other things that like could potentially, it's like, will augments that I maybe would say, hey, maybe don't ship this, go out the door? Maybe. I tend to be pretty conservative when it comes to augments. But there are augments that I wouldn't have shipped that we shipped that ended up being very fun. Cruel Pact being the most famous of them. There are other augments that I wouldn't have shipped that we shouldn't have shipped, like everything must go being the most famous of those examples. But but that's just it. I'm just one person, and so I don't think the team's going to do anything too wild while I'm gone. I think the only other outcome that would be bad, but I don't think this is going to be an issue with the people covering the work I did, is if you do nothing, right? Like, one of the things I think TFT has been successful for is, like, when there are problems or ways to make the game better, we act quick, we change things quick, right? Like, I think other companies would have looked at that Kobuko and went, well, yeah, he's overloaded, but oh well, we'll get him next time, if I compare it to other similar games in the space right now. Whereas we're much more like, oh, that didn't land well? Cracks knuckles, let me fix that, And so if while I was gone, the team took more of a standard, oh, well, we'll get him next time, let's not do anything approach, I think that would be kind of rough. But again, I don't think that's actually what's going to happen. So just weighing out the possibilities. But yeah, so overall, I'm not too worried. I think the team will do great. So, all right, next question. All right, this is actually the most awkward question. I'm going to try not to spend too long on it because otherwise it's going to be kind of arrogant. But what do you consider your biggest achievement yet? So, the person was asking about things like family and job and all that stuff. And you can't pick just one thing, right? Like, I'm proud of my family, I'm proud of TFT, I'm proud of, like, the Odyssey game mode, I'm proud of my work at Nintendo, blah, 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 blah. I think if I have to boil it all down, I think my greatest achievement yet is just how I turned out. I turned out like a decent human being with good morals and a good example, trying to do good into the world. And I'm kind of proud of that. Especially considering when I was growing up, I was kind of a little shit. And when I say growing up, I mean all the way till like 21. It would be really fun, by the way, when Stinger comes to visit, my friend that we had to cancel. Stinger's known me the longest, and he could probably tell you some stories. But the one I always remember is that he and I knew each other in 2nd through 5th grade, and he always thought I was a jerk, because we were some of the smart ones in the class. You know how every kid has their, like, smart, nerdy kids, or at least maybe that was true in the 80s and 90s. I don't know how true it is today. But we were always the smart, nerdy ones, but he always saw me as kind of a jerk. And then in 6th grade, he sat next to me and he's like, well, let's see if you've changed over the summer. And then we became friends. But 2nd through 5th grade, I was kind of a jerk to him. Kind of a jerk to everybody. I also lied a lot growing up. That was another thing I had to work through. And I think, I could have turned out very differently, And I've had a few times to reunite with different friends from high school and look at the people who came out of the city I grew up in the same high school class I grew up in. And that could have been a lot worse. It could have been a lot worse. I've got people I know who are 42 and still living solo with their parents, or struggling to keep a job, or, So I think that's kind of my greatest accomplishment, is just ending up a good person, ending up in a good spot, ending up mildly successful. I'm no Kojima, but I think that's kind of it. So, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this question, but pretty happy with that. Now, still room to improve. Could I be a better dad? Yeah, probably. But, one step at a time. One step at a time. All right, now this question is a much better, interesting question. And I really like this one because this is like one of the hardest questions. It's not necessarily a game design question. It's a humanity question. And this is a hard one. Where do you draw the line between confidence and arrogance? This is something I struggled with for a long time. Holy. Because remember how I was just saying, when I was a kid, I was a little shit? Well, it turns out when you're the smartest one in your class, you tend to be a little arrogant. And you learn people don't like arrogance. Arrogance is one of the most repulsive characteristics. Women don't like arrogant people. They'll pretend they do early. No, women don't like arrogance. Women like confidence. And so, like you said, where's the line? But people don't like arrogance. I learned a lot early on that, like, when you get arrogant, I think right now there's a famous streamer who's dealing with this, where it's like, turns out when you get too arrogant, people rebel against you. And I think even in some of my worst streaming moments, where you like let hints of arrogance through, that's when all of a sudden you get the people on Reddit who decide that they hate you forever because you were arrogant that one time. It's a very repulsive character trait. So, where's the line? Well, the first line is internal versus external. I can internally say things like, I'm the best, I got this, I can do this. But externally, when you're communicating with somebody else, so here's an example. If someone says, hey, Mort, can you fix Kobuko by next patch, right? Internally, I might say something like, yeah, no problem. I'll crush this. I'll get this done in a day. No problem. That sounds kind of arrogant, doesn't it? So externally, I'll say, I'll give it my best shot. I'll get this done, you know? It's a more humble approach to the same thing. And so the difference is the layer of humility that you apply when communicating communicating outward, and it's knowing, basically it's approaching it with caution. I'm struggling a little bit because, like, again, the line really is razor thin. Like, this is such a hard question that a lot of people really struggle with. But I have found that communicating externally humbly while internally confidently is the difference. Big truck coming. I'm going to wait till it goes by. Hello, big truck. Woo! And they're pulling over. Oh, it's because another car's coming. Busy traffic day at 6:30 in the morning. What the hell? 2 whole cars. It's crazy. But yeah, generally, and this is just generally good life advice, is that approaching things with confidence but humility is kind of the line I have found and the strategy I have found. You know, so if I have a meeting, so for example, I had a meeting with one of the really important people at Riot. We're talking like top 10 in importance at Riot. Not a meeting, more just like he was walking by. And they were talking about the design problem I'm working on. And rather than going, oh yeah, I'm going to crush this, no problem, this will be easy, I said things like, yeah, I'm happy to give it a shot. Happy to help where I can, you know? And that is the difference. It's like you approach it with some humility, but internally I'm sort of like, all right, let's do this. Let's crush this. Let's get this done, you know? And I think that's the big line. And so the other thing is that there's one other aspect to this, I think, which is that use logical evidence to state your claim. And what I mean by that is, for example, let's say someone's like, is Mort a good game designer, right? I have the confidence to say yes, because I look at the work I've done that I can attribute specifically to me and the track record I have with that work and go, purely if I were looking at somebody else with this track record, I would call them a good game designer. Therefore, I'm confident I'm a good game designer. But there are people out there that you look at their track record and you're like, you are way more confident than you should be, given as you've made one game, and that one game was very successful. It's like, you sure? I think we've seen this before where like someone has a one-hit wonder, goes really well, then they maybe leave and make their own game, and it goes horribly, and they leave the industry. It's like, maybe you shouldn't have been so arrogant, you know? But generally this is like something you should just be approaching life with anyway, is like approach life with cautious humility, and then results-wise, if you're doing well, have the confidence to keep going and know that you're doing the right thing, you know? And at the end of the day, as you practice this, you'll get better at it, right? And so now, one of the things a lot of people struggle with in their careers, like making a really hard decision between A and B where the trade-offs aren't equal. And like I was reading somebody who was like, well, the way I would decide between A and B is I would give both the players an A/B test it and figure it out. Like, no, that's somebody who doesn't have confidence in their decision-making ability. So they waste a bunch of time with something like A/B testing. And instead, use your knowledge, use your experience, and make a good decision, you know? So yeah, I think that's the big one. If I had to boil it down to one thing, it's externally humble, internally, you got this. Look at your results from a logical standpoint and go, do I have the right to be confident? You know? And if you don't, let's say worst case scenario, let's say you were a game designer and like the last 3 things you worked on didn't land well. You know, that doesn't mean don't be confident. It means change what you're being confident about, right? So in this case, it's like, well, I've still got a lot to learn. And I was like this when I first got to Riot too, because when I first got to Riot, I wasn't confident that like, oh yeah, here I am at Riot and I'm going to show them what's up. But what I was confident on was, I'm going to give this 110%. I can be confident in my effort, and knowing that I'm going to give it 110%, I will learn and try to make up ground, right? Because again, day one of Riot, I was like, I'm just this small Nintendo designer. I don't know what I'm doing compared to these guys. I need to learn. But again, I was very confident in my work ethic and my ability to learn, and that allowed me to ramp up and do good things. So yeah, I think that's the difference. But whoever asked this question, this is a very good question. And it can literally shape your entire relationships with other people, how you are perceived as a person. Because again, if nobody likes somebody who's arrogant, or rather, I should say, good people don't like arrogant people. I'm sure there are a group of people out there that like the fake arrogance, the Andrew Tates of the world. But usually those aren't good people. So good people don't like arrogant people. Yeah. There you go. All right, next question. Oh yeah, this one's a good one too. The Exalted trait. The Exalted trait was sweet. Have you ever thought about making it permanent? Okay, so basically, the answer to anything at this point of, have you thought about making it permanent? The answer is, yes, we've thought about it, and no, we're not going to do it. Now, the reason for this is that we believe sets, like we talked about our complexity level before, but the other thing is that like having sets feel different from each other is a good thing for our game. Having, the set with anomalies feel different than the set with hacks is a good thing. And if set 15 also had hacks, then it's no longer the set with hacks, right? Like mechanics are a great way to identify each shape. And when people talk about what they like about a set, it's like, oh yeah, I loved the dragons in Dragonlands. Well, if the dragons were permanent, what would you like about Dragonlands? Not much, Hilariously enough, most people, what do they like about set 6? oh, that's the augment set. But what else? Now granted, there are some good 5 costs in there. Tom Kench, let's go. But you kind of lose that. And especially if it's something, what do you like about set 5? Shimmer scale items? Oh, wait, those are still around, right? Like, the novelty of new things needs to healthily come and go and not just be added to the game every time. It also allows us an avenue to bring things back, right? Hacks were essentially encounters redone, and we got to bring them back, and that's okay, So something like Exalted, which I agree was great, it was really good, totally come back at some point. There's no reason for it not to come back, just like threats. But basically everything, should it be permanent? The answer is no. Now, the question is, will there ever be anything as cool as augments that could have the potential to be permanent? And the answer to that is actually yes. I can think of at least one thing we have cooking that, if it lands as well as I think it will, could be an augment level, like, holy cow, this is so cool. But even that thing, pretty skeptical it would ever be permanent, for a bunch of reasons I can't get into. But also, again, just the fact that, like, if something becomes permanent, we've added on to TFT as a whole. And it's interesting because I compare this to, I've asked our designers to, like, look at Magic the Gathering for historical learnings. Because Magic the Gathering is one of the few games that has been around for, like, 30 years, almost 40, 30 plus years. And they've had their ups and downs, right? There have been moments where everyone thought Magic was dying. There have been moments where Magic was doing really, really well. There have been really positive additions to their mechanics. And there have been really negative ones that was like, we never should have done this. And we can learn from that. We can learn, as TFT wants to be a game that's going to be around for 10 or 20 years, or longer, hopefully. Let's not make the same mistakes. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And I think if you look at Magic, there are some things they've done that were good, but I bet there's a lot of things that they're like, this is going to be a permanent addition to the game. Oops. Maybe not. Maybe let's not do that, So, like I said, it's less of a commentary on the quality of Exalted, because I think Exalted was great, and I would ship it again. But it's more of a commentary on, don't just keep adding everything into the game. That's the big thing. So, now I think the closest thing we have to Exalted in the game right now is, I always blank on the name of it. Oh wait, no I don't, because it's actually got Exalted in it. An Exalted Adventure, right? Which is the pick 3 2 costs, 3-star 2 of them, and get a bunch of rewards. Because it's like, which ones you get change every game, and you're signing up for a game that's going to be pretty different. But like, something like that's like a neat variation of it, but not the same thing, And that's the thing too, as let's say we did have an augment that literally perfectly encapsulated Exalted. Well, then if we tried to reprint Exalted, people are always sick of it, right? So you kind of lose that ability to bring something back and go, oh, that's cool. That's something I'd want to do. So yeah, again, TLDR here is, nope, won't be permanent. But it's not an insult to Exalted. Exalted was great, and I would bring it back in a heartbeat. So yeah. All right, last one, and this is another really good one. I'm afraid I'm not going to do this question justice in like 6 to 8 minutes, but this is a good one. How do you go about borrowing from other games, not TFT specifically, but just in general? And where do you draw the line between, inspiration and imitation / theft? This is such a good question. And I think everyone in the industry is going to have different opinions. I think there are different examples of the industry doing it right and doing it wrong. But to me, the games industry is an industry that builds off on itself, right? Like, the idea that somebody invents a mechanic and then everyone goes, oh, that's so cool, is a good thing, right? It means more innovation for the scene, more games. And I'm going to pick on an era to talk about this, which is Mario 64, okay? And there's lots of examples I could use, and I'm dating myself by using this example. But let's talk about Mario 64, right? Mario 64 invented this concept of 3D platformers, and it was great. Mario 64 is one of the greatest games of all time. Good stuff. Not, a year or two later, you get games like, well, I mean, you've got the bad ones, right? Like your Glover 64s or whatever, but then you've got stuff like Banjo-Kazooie, right? Banjo-Kazooie is essentially Mario 64 plus, right? Like, it's very much the same thing. It's inspired by Mario 64. Is it imitating Mario 64? There'd be some people who would say yes, but my argument here would be no. They went, whoa, 3D platformers are cool. I'd love to do my own spin on it. And they added their own things. They added their own movement styles. They made their own aspects to it. And because of that, I think Banjo-Kazooie lives on sort of as its own memorable extension of the genre. But there are definitely games, you go back to like the Street Fighter 2 era, and you can find examples, I can't even think of their names, but like, you can find examples where it's like, yep, you made 8 characters, this one's your Ryu clone, this one's your Dhalsim clone, this one, and it's like, you didn't put your own spin on it, you didn't innovate, you just copied and put a new coat of paint on it. Now the good news is, usually, not always, but usually, the industry self-regulates this by success, right? The reason I can't name those fighting games that just directly copied Street Fighter is because they weren't good and no one cared, right? But the ones who did copy Street Fighter but put their own spin on it, like, I don't know, Mortal Kombat, did really well. And that's a good thing, right? For every Slay the Spire, you get your Monster Trains and your whatevers that all try to copy it, but the ones that are truly good get remembered. And that's a good thing. So to me, as long as you're putting your own spin on it and pushing the genre forward, that's inspiration, right? You were inspired by a thing and you ran with it and you made it better. Now, obviously, in this topic, we have to talk about, TFT, because we certainly didn't invent the genre. Dota Auto Chess was first, but it inspired the team who looked at it and went, this is cool, let's do our own version, and let's innovate in the space. One of the biggest innovations being the set model. And then we ran with it and we're successful, right? But man, there's so, like, you can go back and study the industry as a whole and find okay, Call of Duty was big. Here come all the Call of Duty copies. Not many of them were good, but the few that were got to live on. Battlefield or Grand Theft Auto was big. Here come all the Grand Theft Auto clones. But the ones that were good, maybe like a Saints Row, they got to live on. But the ones that weren't, not so much. So, yeah, it's one of the things that I think, Pal World brought this up, right? When I did that Pal World talk. It's like, well, Pal World's just copying Pokemon. It's like, well, I wouldn't say they're copying it. Now, definitely, there's certain things they could have pushed a little bit better. But when you're inspired by something and put your own spin on it, that's okay. And so I think the general thing for me is just, when I say put your own spin on it, really do put your own spin on it, right? Like, if I were inspired by Mario 64 today, I probably don't need exactly a long jump and a backflip and a triple jump. I could probably come up with something better. I think like a modern take on this is like a Hat in Time. A Hat in Time is like the modern inspired by Mario 64. Doesn't mean it copied it. And so that's kind of the line. I think if you look at, hilariously enough, like Hearthstone Battlegrounds, I know a lot of their set mechanics recently have been inspired by TFT. Are their trinkets just augments? Maybe. But again, I take it as they were inspired by us. That's cool. Or, I mean, I know they also basically have opening portals now. So again, I just take that as, that means whoever came up with portals on our end had a really good idea that other people liked so much that they felt inspired to use it. And that's a good thing, right? I hate to go back to my parents, but they always said imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And whenever my parents would give me these, sayings, I would always be like, parents. But they were right. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And in an industry like this, as long as... Now, there are examples where this goes bad, right? One of the most infamous examples, in my opinion, is back when mobile games were getting kind of big, there was a mobile game called Threes. Kind of a cute little puzzle game. Worth the $3 you paid for it. No big deal. And then very, very quickly, it got imitated into a game called 256. But 256 actually took off and kind of took all the thunder from Threes. And you could tell the difference, right? Like Threes had this like cute polish and charm and something that had been a lot of effort put in. Whereas 256 was like, I made this in 3 weeks as quick as I could. But, So the industry has some of those for sure, which feel bad. But, yeah. Anyway, like I said, I could talk about this question for a long time. Because like I said, I feel like it's a shame because I feel like there's a lot of good lessons to learn from video game history and archiving. But the problem is, any of these videos on YouTube are generally done by like 22-year-olds who don't know anything. Or they just like Google a few articles and that's what they write about. So, kind of a shame. A lot of cars today. So, anyway, gonna end it there. We're at 32 minutes. So, almost done with my walk. All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed. Happy Tuesday. Have a great week. Continue to keep kicking ass and getting ready for Worlds. And yeah, have a good day. All right, that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.